you'll listen closely. When darkness wraps the world and dreams begin to stir, you've arrived at the right place. Welcome to Between Dreams and Shadows, the sanctuary of stories that live between sleep and the unknown. Here, every tale is more than a story. It's a portal to hidden worlds, forgotten secrets, whispers from beyond, and shadows that speak as your eyes begin to close. If you're drawn to mysteries, haunting legends, and stories that send shivers down your spine, this channel is your new nighttime ritual. Before we begin, I invite you to become part of this growing nightbound community. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale. New stories drop regularly, always under the veil of night. Like this video if you enjoy that chill before sleep. It helps this channel grow and lets me bring you deeper, darker stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange dream or felt something watching in the dark? Your experience might inspire the next tale. Now, take a deep breath, turn off the lights, leave the world behind, and get ready to drift between dreams and shadows. Setting the atmosphere, I moved into the house at the end of October. It was an old Victorian structure, nestled deep within a quiet neighborhood. The kind where the streetlights cast long orange shadows, and the wind always seemed to whisper things through the trees. The air smelled like damp wood and thyme. The realtor had called it charming, with great bones and character. I think what she meant was, no one had lived there for a very long time. It showed. My name is Daniel. I'm a freelance illustrator, mostly working at night. Silence has always been my companion, my tool for focus. But in this house, the silence never truly felt silent. The first night was the worst, or maybe the best, depending on how you define beginning. There was no furniture yet, just a mattress on the floor of the upstairs bedroom, and a few boxers stacked in corners like quiet sentinels. The walls groaned, as old houses do, and the wind cried softly against the windows. But it wasn't the wind that unsettled me. It was the way the quiet seemed intentional, like something was waiting. Like something was listening just as closely as I was. At 2:47 a.m., I opened my eyes, not because of a sound, but because of something else. Something ... just beyond the edge of perception. The air felt heavy, not suffocating, but attentive, as if the house had taken a breath and was holding it. I stared at the ceiling, barely breathing myself, sensing that something was near. Not outside, not beneath me, within the walls. But when I got up and checked the room, there was nothing. Only stillness. Only silence. I told myself it was just the unfamiliarity of a new place. A trick of the mind. Still, I didn't sleep again. That night by morning, I had almost convinced myself that nothing had happened. Almost. But as I made my coffee and walked into the hallway, I passed the wall just outside the bedroom door. I stopped. There were scratch marks. 3 faint, vertical lines, almost like fingernails, dragged through the wallpaper. I touched them, fresh, and then, barely audible, as if breathing beneath my hand. Daniel? Just a whisper, a sigh almost. I turned around instantly, heart frozen. But again, nothing. Empty house. Morning sun. The feeling returned, the strange weight in the air. But now it had a shape, a direction, not a dream, a presence, something inside the house, something that knew my name. The first signs of disturbance. I tried to explain it, aware. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe the creaks of the house were playing tricks on me. But, as I stared at the faint scratch marks in the hallway, I knew something had touched that wall. By the third night, the feeling had evolved. It wasn't just the occasional shiver crawling up my neck. It was the sensation of being watched closely, intently, like prey being studied. I avoided the hallway after dark. Strange things started to happen, little, almost forgettable details, if you weren't paying close attention. My bedroom door, which I always closed before bed, would be cracked open when I woke up. The faucet in the upstairs bathroom would drip slowly through the night, even though I hadn't used it. And then, there were the shadows. They didn't move, exactly, but they didn't stay still either. Once, as I passed by the mirror in the hallway, I caught sight of one just a flicker, a tall shape in the reflection, standing perfectly still behind me. I turned instantly. No one. Just the same wallpapered walls, and the faint smell of dust and age. But the mirror had fogged. Not from me. I hadn't been close enough to breathe on it. That night, I dreamt of the walls opening like a mouth. I dreamt of whispering voices spilling out from the cracks, like smoke curling through the air. They didn't say anything I could understand, just a chorus of murmurs, circling me, closing in. When I awoke, the bedroom felt colder, and my feet were dirty, like I'd walked barefoot through the attic, but I hadn't left my bed. I began to question my own reality. Was I sleepwalking? Hallucinating? Was it stress? Maybe something deeper inside my mind unraveling. Yet, every time I started to dismiss these fears, the house responded. Lights flickered slightly when I entered certain rooms. My phone would lose battery overnight, completely drained, even in airplane mode. And the cats from across the street, who once lounged near my front porch, stopped coming. They stared from the sidewalk now, refusing to cross onto my property. It was as if the house itself had become aware of me, and it didn't want company. Or worse, it didn't want me to leave. The sound that shouldn't existed began as a faint hum, the kind you can only hear in complete stillness, low, vibrating through the bones more than the ears. It came at night, always around the same hour, between 2 and 3 a.m. At first, I thought it might be the old pipes or some electrical wiring inside the walls, but then it changed. The hum began to shape itself. It wasn't mechanical. It was deliberate, cadenced, whispered. I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, afraid to move. The sound would start low, almost buried beneath the silence, then rise gently, as if someone or something was drawing closer to the wall, just inches from where my head rested on the other side. And then, the whisper would return. Daniel. This time, it didn't just say my name. It lingered, drew out syllables, repeated them in ways that didn't sound human-like. Something was trying to mimic the way a person speaks, but hadn't quite learned how. There was a crackle behind the voice, like static soaked in breath. I pressed my ear to the wall once. What I heard was not a voice, it was a conversation, but only one side of it. Dozens of soft, overlapping whispers, tangled together, moving in and out of rhythm. None of the words made sense, but the tone, that was clear. They were talking about me. There was a breath of silence, then a sudden, sharp knock on the other side of the wall, so close it made my head jerk back. 3 knocks. Precise.com. As if it were knocking back. I stumbled from bed, heart hammering in my chest, grabbing the flashlight I kept on the nightstand. I scanned the room. Nothing. I opened the closet. Nothing. I even checked beneath the bed, though I already knew that whatever was doing this didn't need to hide there. I leaned toward the wall again, and then it whispered, "Don't look." That was when I knew. This wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't even trying to scare me. It was trying to communicate, and more than that, it wanted me to listen. The presence without a face. I stopped sleeping, with the lights off. It wasn't out of fear of the dark itself, but rather what moved within it. A shape not always visible, but always felt. Like the cold sensation on the back of your neck when someone stands too close, breathing, but not speaking. Only now, it was inside my house, inside the walls. The presence didn't follow footsteps, or creaking doors. It made itself known in subtler ways that spoke directly to the mind, to the instincts we try to ignore. Books from my shelves would fall in the middle of the night, always landing open, their pages fluttering like wings, before going still. My phone left on the nightstand, Once recorded 4 hours of audio on its own. I didn't remember touching it. I listened to it the next morning. Most of it was silence. But somewhere around the second hour, a sound emerged. Soft, rhythmic, like someone breathing inside the walls, inches from the microphone. And then came the whisper again, my name, repeated, over and over, sometimes slow, sometimes panicked, but it was always my name. I tried to ignore it. I left the house for a full day walk to the city, sat in a coffee shop, tried to pretend that I was still in control of my life. When I returned, the atmosphere had changed. The moment I stepped through the door, it was like stepping into a thick fog, except there was no mist, only pressure, awareness. The house wasn't just alive now, it was waiting. I walked into the hallway. The scratches on the wallpaper had multiplied, faint and jagged, like the marks of restless fingers. My breath caught when I noticed one of them stretched into a word. Listen. No punctuation. No explanation. I reached out to touch it, and that's when I felt it just behind the wall. The pressure of a hand pressing back against mine, cold, solid. But when I yanked my hand away and peeled back the wallpaper, there was nothing but plaster. The presence didn't need a face. It didn't need a body. It was not bound by flesh or form. It was in the walls, and somehow, it had always been there. I began to wonder, had it been waiting for me? Or had I somehow called it? The unspoken warning stopped questioning if it was real. Now, I needed to know what it wanted. The patterns in the house were no longer random. Each movement, each sound, had rhythm and tension. The knocks came in sequences, like code. Lights flickered in time with the whispers, syncing like a silent language I wasn't yet fluent in. One night, I noticed the living room clock had stopped at 3:13 a.m. Not just once. Every night, the hands would reset themselves to that exact moment. No matter how many times I rewound it, by morning, it was back again. I began to document it, ultimings, sounds, changes in the house. But the more I recorded, the stranger things became. My journal entries began to repeat without my writing them. Sentences I'd never typed appeared on my computer screen. Don't ignore it. You invited it in. You listened. Now, it speaks. I hadn't written those words, and yet, they were in my voice. Then came the scratches, not just on the walls, but on my skin. Thin, pale lines that appeared overnight, always in sets of 3, always on the same part of my forearm, as if something had gently, carefully, marked me, like a message, or a signature. One evening, I tried sleeping with white noise, anything to drown out the whispers. I played static through the speaker by my bed, and turned the volume up until it felt like the air itself was trembling. But beneath it always, beneath it, the voice returned. This time it didn't say my name, it just whispered one word, clear and deliberate. Leave. Not a threat, a warning, and I believed it. The air in the room shifted. The ceiling creaked as though something heavy had moved above it. I held my breath, frozen, and for the first time, I sensed hesitation from the thing behind the walls, as if some part of it, however small, was trying to protect me from what came next. That's when I realized, this wasn't just a haunting, it was a gate, and it was slowly, steadily opening. The moment of truth. I couldn't ignore the patterns anymore. They weren't random sounds or tricks of a disturbed mind. They were deliberate signals, a path, and I was already walking it. I traced the marks in my journal, lining up times, sounds, and symbols. It all pointed to one place in the house, the basement, a space I rarely visited. Something about it had always felt wrong, too cold, too quiet, as if the air down there was too still, even when everything else was moving. At 3:13 a.m. that night, I stood at the top of the basement stairs, flashlight in hand. The door was open. I didn't remember opening it. The air that drifted up smelled faintly of soil, damp and old. But underneath it was something else, something sweet, like decaying flowers left too long in a sealed box. I hesitated. The flashlight flickered. I took one step, then another. Each creak of the wooden stairs echoed like a scream in the silence. Halfway down, the whisper came again, not from the walls, but from beneath the floorboards. "We remember." I froze. My hand trembled. I scanned the room with the beam of light. Nothing. Just old furniture, dust, and shadows that didn't behave quite like they should. Then I saw it drawn in chalk, barely visible under a shelf pushed into the corner. A symbol, circular, with jagged lines radiating outward like a sun made of thorns, and it was still glowing faintly. Something inside me shifted. Memories I didn't recognize bubbled up, dreams I never remembered having, faces I couldn't name. A girl crying in the dark, a voice telling me to listen. The feeling that I had been here before. The house didn't want to harm me. It wanted to remind me. I dropped to my knees, staring at the symbol, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't the first time. The voice had whispered to me when I was a child. I had heard it before, but the memory had been buried, hidden beneath years of silence and forgetting. This wasn't a haunting. This was a reunion, and I had to decide right there whether to shut the door and walk away, or step through and remember everything. The inevitability of darkness. I stepped forward. The symbol on the floor pulsed faintly beneath my feet, not with light, but with something deeper, something alive. The air around me thickened, each breath heavier than the last, as if the house itself had turned inward. Watching, listening, I reached out and touched the chalk symbol with the tips of my fingers. Everything went silent. No hums, no whispers, just a stillness so profound it felt like being buried beneath snow. And then I remembered, not in flashes, but in waves, a forgotten childhood. A house like this one, not identical, but familiar. Another voice in another wall, one that had once protected me from something far worse. The memory sharpened. Me, at 5 years old, holding a candle, standing in a circle of salt, crying as something scraped and moaned inside the walls, and the voice, that same voice, calming me, guiding me. It wasn't a spirit, it was a guardian, but somewhere along the line, I had left, grown up, forgotten, and in forgetting, I had unsealed the barrier. The thing it had protected me from had followed me, and now it had found me again. The presence that had once whispered my name out of care now spoke in urgency. It wasn't warning me anymore. It was pleading. "It's here." My flashlight flickered, then died completely. The room was swallowed in black dot, and then I heard the other voice. Not a whisper, not gentle. It was raw, like metal grinding against bone. It came from the far wall, deep, buried, and yet it was inside me all at once. You never left. You only closed your eyes. A coldness filled the room, not physical, but existential. The kind of cold that reminded you how small you really are. How hollow your soul feels when something vast and ancient gazes back at you through time. There was no going back. The line had been crossed. The voice that had once kept the darkness at bay was growing weaker, fainter, as though the thing behind the walls had begun to devour it, and now I was the only one left between it and the rest of the world. The fear that stirs. I don't remember how. I got out of the basement. One moment I was staring into the dark, and the next, I was waking up on the living room floor. The early light of dawn casting pale shadows across the walls. My throat was dry, my skin cold, but my body unharmed, almost as if it had let me go. The symbol was gone. No chalk, no glow, no trace that anything had ever been there. The basement looked normal. Too normal, sterile, lifeless, but I knew better. I moved through the house slowly for days after that, afraid to speak aloud, afraid even to think too clearly. I knew now that thoughts, like sounds, echo, and something had heard mine. The whispers didn't return. Not at first. But the silence was worse, because silence makes you listen to the creaks, to the sigh of the wind, to the distant hum of old pipes. Or is it? I began to hear small things again. Not full voices, just impressions. The sound of my name said from another room, though I lived alone. My bedroom light dimming slightly at 3:13 a.m., even though I had changed every bulb. Once, while brushing my teeth, I looked up into the mirror and saw the door behind me slowly swing open. I never heard it move. I think the voice is still here, but it's different now. It's waiting, not desperate, not angry, just watching, biding time. It knows something I don't. And the worst part, I'm starting to feel it too. The pull, like the house is calling me back to the basement, not to harm me, but to remind me of something I still haven't fully remembered. And each night, as I lie in bed and the shadows stretch long across the ceiling, I listen. Not out of fear, but out of familiarity. Because once you've heard your name whispered in the dark, in a voice that isn't yours, you never really sleep again. The fear that stays, I don't remember how. I got out of the basement. One moment I was staring into the dark, and the next, I was waking up on the living room floor. The early light of dawn, casting pale shadows across the walls. My throat was dry, my skin cold, but my body unharmed, almost as if it had let me go. The symbol was gone. No chalk, no glow, no trace that anything had ever been there. The basement looked normal. Too normal, sterile, lifeless, but I knew better. I moved through the house slowly for days after that, afraid to speak aloud, afraid even to think too clearly. I knew now that thoughts, like sounds, echo, and something had heard mine. The whispers didn't return. Not at first. But the silence was worse, because silence makes you listen to the creaks, to the sigh of the wind, to the distant hum of old pipes. Or is it? I began to hear small things again. Not full voices, just impressions. The sound of my name said from another room, though I lived alone. My bedroom light dimming slightly at 3:13 a.m., even though I had changed every bulb. Once, while brushing my teeth, I looked up into the mirror and saw the door behind me slowly swing open. I never heard it move. I think the voice is still here, but it's different now. It's waiting, not desperate, not angry, just watching, biding time. It knows something I don't. And the worst part, I'm starting to feel it too. The pull, like the house is calling me back to the basement, not to harm me, but to remind me of something I still haven't fully remembered. And each night, as I lie in bed and the shadows stretch long across the ceiling, I listen. Not out of fear, but out of familiarity. Because once you've heard your name whispered in the dark, in a voice that isn't yours, you never really sleep again.